I caught my wife red-handed with her affair partner at the bar. She never expected what came next. Hey Reddit. I had a gut feeling for weeks that something was off with my wife. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just little things that didn't add up. She started dressing up more when she went out, even if it was just to run errands. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always in her pocket, face down when charging. She'd get texts late at night, claiming it was just her friends, but the way she'd tilt the screen away from me told a different story. The real kicker was her sudden interest in girls' nights out. She used to hate clubs and bars, saying she outgrew that phase in college, but now she had one every other weekend. That was when I knew something was wrong. I tried to ignore it at first. I convinced myself I was overthinking, letting paranoia get the best of me. But deep down, I knew the truth. So, I started paying more attention. I checked our phone records and noticed a recurring number, one she texted at all hours. A quick search revealed it belonged to some guy named Jake. I didn't recognize the name, but I sure as hell was going to find out who he was. Instead of confronting her right away, I decided to gather evidence. I installed a small GPS tracker in her car, nothing illegal, just something to see where she was going. The next time she went out with her girls, I checked the tracker. Instead of a club or her friend's place, she went to a fancy bar downtown, one we used to go to back when we were still happy. I clenched my fists as I stared at the blinking dot on my phone screen. My wife was there, but not with her friends. That was when I decided I needed to catch her in the act. The next weekend, she told me she was going out again. I acted casual, nodded, and even kissed her on the cheek before she left, like the clueless husband she thought I was. The moment she walked out the door, I grabbed my jacket and got in my car. I parked a block away from the bar and walked inside, keeping my head low, scanning the crowd. And then I saw her. She was sitting at the bar, laughing, leaning into a man I instantly recognized from his social media, Jake. He had his arm casually draped over the back of her chair, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. My stomach churned with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet. I wanted to see just how deep this betrayal ran. I watched from a distance, my hands balled into fists. They ordered drinks, clinked their glasses together, and she looked at him like she used to look at me. That was the final straw. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked up to them. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "Having fun?" Her face went pale as she turned to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. Jake looked between us, clearly confused, before realization dawned on his face. He tried to play it cool, but I could see the nervous twitch in his jaw. My wife stammered, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water.
I thought you were at home," she finally managed.
"Oh, I was," I said, tilting my head. But then I figured, why not surprise my wife on her fun night out? Turns out, I'm the one who got surprised. She looked like she was about to cry, but I had no sympathy left in me. I turned to Jake, sizing him up. He wasn't anything special, just an average-looking guy who thought he could mess with another man's wife without consequences. "So, Jake," I said, leaning on the bar. "How long have you been screwing my wife?" He gulped, clearly not expecting me to be this direct.
I didn't know she was married," he lied, glancing at her.
"Oh, come on," I scoffed. "You really expect me to believe that?" I turned back to my wife, who was now trembling. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice dangerously low. "And this is how you repay me? Sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face?" Tears streamed down her face now, but I wasn't done. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the betrayal I was feeling. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, then whispered, 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, sneaking around, pretending to be the loving wife while she was giving herself to another man. I felt sick. I took a step back, shaking my head. "You know what? I don't even want to hear your excuses. We're done." She reached for my arm, desperation in her eyes. "Please, it didn't mean anything. I still love you." I yanked my arm away. "Love? Don't insult me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Jake, sensing that things were about to get even uglier, mumbled something about leaving and practically ran out of the bar. My wife looked around, realizing that people were starting to stare. But I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see the woman who destroyed our marriage. I took one last look at her, shaking my head in disgust. "You just lost the best thing you ever had." And with that, I turned around and walked out, leaving her there, broken and exposed. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because what happened next would change everything. Update. I didn't go home right away after walking out of that bar. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I sat in my car for a while, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to process everything. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal right under my nose. And now, what? Divorce? Revenge? I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to make this easy for her. When I finally drove home, I didn't text or call her. I wanted her to sit in that bar, drowning in the weight of what she had done. It wasn't until 2 hours later that she came home. I could hear her sniffles as she stood by the door, probably expecting me to yell or break something. But I was past that stage. I was done being the emotional wreck. I was thinking clearly now. She stepped inside hesitantly, wiping her tear-streaked face. "Please, just let me explain," she begged. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching her. "Explain what, exactly? That you've been cheating for 6 months? That you've been lying to me, making me feel crazy for suspecting something was off?" She swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. "I never meant for it to happen. It just did." I let out a bitter laugh. "That's the best you've got? It just happened? Like you tripped and fell into his bed?" She winced, her lower lip trembling. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." I shook my head. "You don't get to say that. Love isn't lying to my face every day. Love isn't sneaking around behind my back. Love isn't making me feel like an idiot while you play house with someone else." She started crying again, harder this time, but I wasn't moved. I had spent months living in blissful ignorance, trusting her, believing in our marriage. She had taken all of that and crushed it. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want a divorce," I said without hesitation. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "No, please. We can work through this." I let out a dry chuckle. "Work through what? The fact that you had another man touching you for 6 months? That every time you kissed me, you had already kissed him first? No. There's nothing to work through." She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I can change. I'll do anything." I didn't care anymore. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. I started packing my things. Not because I was leaving, but because I wanted to take control of the situation. This was my house. She was the one who was going to leave. But then, something unexpected happened. As I packed, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was from Jake's wife. "We need to talk. I have something you need to see." Another update. I met Jake's wife the next day at a coffee shop. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when she walked in, I could tell she was just as broken as I was. She had dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days, and when she sat down across from me, her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry to just text you out of nowhere," she said, "but I found out about them a few days ago. I was trying to gather proof before I confronted him. And then I saw what happened at the bar." I nodded, my jaw tightening. "Yeah. I caught them red-handed." She sighed, sliding her phone across the table. "I think you should see this." I picked up her phone and pressed play on the video. It was footage from a hidden camera, one she had installed in their living room. And there, clear as day, was my wife, sitting on Jake's couch, laughing, touching him, and then, my stomach turned, kissing him. The timestamp showed this was from 2 months ago. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "It wasn't just some mistake," Jake's wife said quietly. "It wasn't just a one-time thing. They had a whole routine." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep myself from exploding. I had suspected it was bad, but seeing the proof made my anger burn hotter. "So what are you planning to do?" I asked. She set her jaw. "Divorce. And I'm taking everything I can." I nodded. "Same here. But there's more," she said hesitantly. I frowned. "More?" She slid another piece of paper across the table. It was a screenshot of a text conversation. It was between Jake and my wife. And one message stood out. "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. I love you more than anything." My vision blurred. My wife hadn't just been cheating. She had been planning to leave me. I pushed the phone away, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to go. I needed to get away before I did something reckless. Jake's wife reached out, touching my hand lightly. "You're not alone in this." I nodded, standing up. "Thanks. But this wasn't over. If my wife wanted to betray me this badly, I was going to make sure she regretted it. And I had the perfect plan." Final update. I didn't tell my wife that I had met Jake's wife. I acted normal, well, as normal as I could, while secretly preparing for the final blow. I wanted her to feel safe, to think that she could manipulate her way back into my good graces. Meanwhile, I had already contacted a divorce lawyer. I provided all the evidence, the texts, the video, the phone records. My lawyer was ruthless. He told me we had enough to prove infidelity, which meant she would get almost nothing. I waited until everything was in place. Then, one evening, while she was making dinner, I dropped the divorce papers onto the counter. "Sign them," I said flatly. She turned, looking at the papers, then back at me. Her face crumpled. "No. Please. We can go to therapy. We can fix this. I shook my head. There's nothing left to fix. Tears filled her eyes. You really hate me that much? I stared at her, my expression unreadable. I don't hate you. I just don't love you anymore. She broke down, sobbing, begging, but I didn't care. I walked away, letting her process the consequences of her actions. The divorce process was brutal, for her, at least. She had to move out, and I got to keep the house. Jake? He lost everything too. His wife took him for everything he had, and last I heard, he was living in some dingy apartment, completely miserable. As for me? I was finally free. The pain was still there, but with each passing day, it faded. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was the man who had walked away stronger. And as I signed the final papers, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief.